What if we told you that one of Africa's poorest countries just cleared an astonishing $4.79 billion debt without a single dollar from the West? Unbelievable, right? Yet that's exactly what Burkina Faso has done, boldly rewriting the rules and declaring to the world, we don't need Western aid. This nation, often overlooked on the global stage, is proving that Africa can stand tall without foreign crutches. So the real question is, why do we still cling to the myth that Africa can't survive without Western help? For decades, the West painted Africa as helpless and dependent, but Burkina Faso just shattered that narrative by paying off its national debt entirely on its own terms. Imagine that, a country once dismissed as impoverished, now taking charge of its financial destiny. How did they pull this off? Let's dig deeper. Burkina Faso's Prime Minister, Dr. Apollinaire Guillaume Tambela, stunned the world by announcing the full repayment of $4.79 billion in domestic debt. No IMF rescue packages, no World Bank loans, no Western handouts, just pure economic sovereignty. This wasn't just a financial move. It was an act of defiance, a declaration of independence from the grip of global financial institutions. Rather than begging for help, Burkina Faso turned inward to its people, its markets, and its growing national pride. The government began issuing bonds to local investors, banks, and businesses, giving citizens the opportunity to invest directly in their nation's recovery. It was a bold strategy, one built on trust and confidence. In a region long defined by dependency, Burkina Faso sparked a new mindset that true power lies in homegrown solutions. Investor trust skyrocketed, and local capital became the key to national progress. By focusing on domestic financing, Burkina Faso transformed debt into a tool for economic self-reliance. This shift didn't just pay the bills. It ignited a new sense of pride, unity, and belief in what Africa can achieve on its own. Even amidst political instability and security threats, Burkina Faso stood firm, proving that when a nation believes in itself, no challenge is too great. Despite the growing threat of terrorism and the relentless conflict in the Sahel region, Burkina Faso's leadership managed to navigate one of the most challenging periods in its history with remarkable composure. While instability in most nations leads to economic collapse and investor flight, Burkina Faso turned the tide, maintaining financial stability and investor confidence even in the face of crisis. The government worked strategically to ensure its bonds remained attractive to investors, emphasizing transparency, accountability, and responsible fiscal management. Under the guidance of Prime Minister Apollinaire Guillaume Tambela, Burkina Faso demonstrated that resilience and discipline could triumph even in the harshest conditions. One of the most crucial elements in sustaining investor trust was Burkina Faso's wise use of its natural resources. The nation's thriving gold mining sector, a cornerstone of its economy, became a financial backbone for the government's domestic debt strategy. By leveraging gold revenues to secure its bonds, the country provided investors with additional assurance, a tangible guarantee of stability and value. While external powers often pressure African nations into debt-dependent reforms, Burkina Faso chose a different path. The leadership refused to bow to Western demands for political or economic concessions, and instead built confidence within its own financial ecosystem, and the strategy paid off. The success of this approach relied on the cooperation of the broader financial system. Banks, pension funds, and private businesses were encouraged to invest in government bonds, which offered safe and profitable returns while supporting national debt repayment. This was more than a policy. It was a collective movement. The private sector also stepped up, contributing to infrastructure projects and government financing. Through these public-private partnerships, Burkina Faso cultivated a sense of shared responsibility and national pride. proving that rebuilding an economy is not just the job of government, but of every citizen and business working together. At the same time, the financial sector deepened its markets by introducing new investment products, such as bond options and other instruments, to attract a wider range of investors, from major financial institutions to small enterprises. This diversification opened the doors for more capital inflow and allowed the government to steadily repay its $4.79 billion debt entirely without Western assistance. Because paying off a national debt of that scale isn't just about managing numbers. It's about building trust, unity, and a shared vision for financial independence. True economic transformation requires creating the right conditions for sustainable, long-term growth, and Burkina Faso understood this perfectly. The government made smart, forward-looking choices by using the funds raised from domestic borrowing, not only to settle existing debts, but also to invest in long-term national projects that would strengthen the country's economic foundation. They prioritized infrastructure development, focusing on critical sectors like transportation, energy, and mining. These investments were designed to do more than just stimulate short-term growth. They aimed to rebuild the nation's backbone, making Burkina Faso more resilient and self-sufficient. By reinvesting in its physical and economic infrastructure, Burkina Faso laid the groundwork for a future that could attract foreign investors seeking stability and growth in West Africa. This wasn't merely about clearing old debts. It was about building a country capable of standing tall without depending on external lenders. Through this visionary approach, Burkina Faso shifted from survival to progress. Paying off the national debt became a catalyst for new opportunities and a symbol of a nation charting its own economic destiny. This success story is far more than a financial milestone. It's a bold statement about Africa's potential. By repaying its domestic debt through smart strategies and local investments, Burkina Faso proved that the continent doesn't need to lean on the West to prosper. Add your voice to the total liberation of Africa by leaving a comment in the comments section below. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more informative videos like this one. Let's proceed. It's not just a story of debt repayment, it's a declaration of economic independence. The government placed its trust in its people, its markets, and its resources. Instead of running to international institutions for handouts, Burkina Faso harnessed its domestic strength, mobilizing local capital, boosting investor confidence, and channeling funds into long-term national growth. In doing so, they set a powerful precedent for the rest of Africa. Self-reliance is not a dream, it's a choice. Burkina Faso is challenging the global narrative, proving that African nations have the tools, talent, and resilience to thrive without foreign control. But that raises the question, if Burkina Faso could do it, why haven't others followed suit? And here's where the story takes a shocking turn. While the country was fighting to rebuild its economy, the West did not step in to help. In fact, the opposite happened. After the military transitions of 2022, the European Union and other Western powers froze all aid and imposed sanctions on Burkina Faso and its Sahel allies. At a time when Burkina Faso needed collaboration and solidarity, it was instead met with punishment and isolation. Western nations suspended vital development funds and financial support, hoping to pressure the country into political and economic submission. Yet, despite being abandoned and sanctioned, Burkina Faso stood firm, proving that true sovereignty comes not from foreign aid, but from self-belief, unity, and strategic leadership. The message from the West was unmistakable: play by our rules or pay the price. The sanctions imposed on Burkina Faso weren't mere diplomatic gestures. They were part of a calculated strategy designed to destabilize the country and pressure its leaders into submission. The aim was clear: force the military-led government to step down, restore the Western-backed status quo, and re-establish the cycle of dependency that had defined much of Africa's relationship with the West for decades. By crippling the nation's economy, they hoped to turn the people against their own leadership and push the country back into compliance. But what happened next shocked everyone. Instead of collapsing under sanctions or begging for aid, Burkina Faso defied the odds under the leadership of President Ibrahim Traoré. The government made a historic choice to take full control of its destiny. They didn't plead for forgiveness. They didn't wait for Western approval. They chose to stand tall and self-sufficient. This wasn't a reckless reaction. It was a strategic and deliberate act of independence. Burkina Faso made the bold decision that few African nations have ever dared to make. They declared that they did not need the West to survive. Rather than turning to international institutions like the IMF or World Bank, the government turned inward, drawing strength from its greatest resource, its own people. They decided to build an economy powered by domestic markets, local investors, and national unity. It was a revolutionary act in a continent where foreign aid is often portrayed as a lifeline. Burkina Faso's leaders recognized that as long as Africa depends on others, it will never truly be free. They refused to play into the narrative that Africa is weak, helpless, or incapable of charting its own economic path. By rejecting Western aid, Burkina Faso broke a generational cycle of dependency. The country chose self-reliance over submission, pride over pressure, and sovereignty over subservience. No longer would it wait for donors to dictate its future or rely on handouts that come with hidden strings attached. Instead, the government rallied its local businesses, banks, and citizens to invest directly in the nation's growth and stability. This wasn't easy. Convincing the people to believe in themselves after years of dependency required rebuilding trust and confidence in local systems. But the leadership persisted, and their strategy began to bear fruit. Despite ongoing security threats and external pressures, Burkina Faso's economy didn't collapse. It adapted and strengthened. The West had expected the nation to crumble under isolation, but instead, it thrived through innovation and unity. Burkina Faso proved that when a country places faith in its people rather than in foreign approval, it becomes unshakable. They expected Burkina Faso to come crawling back for help within months, but the opposite unfolded. Despite ongoing security challenges, local businesses and markets united behind the government's bold vision for independence. Even under harsh foreign sanctions, Burkina Faso raised substantial funds from local investors. Steering clear of its usual dependence on Western creditors and international financiers, the outcome was remarkable. The nation continued its development projects, repaid debts, and stabilized its economy, all without Western assistance. This wasn't just about surviving without aid. It was about thriving on their own terms. The West failed to anticipate one crucial element: the strength of African self-determination. Under President Ibrahim Traoré's leadership, Burkina Faso proved that African nations can govern their own affairs and manage their finances without submission to external powers. The message was clear: Africa doesn't need to rely on Western countries or financial institutions to stand tall. Rather than viewing Africa through a lens of dependency, the West must now acknowledge the continent's capacity for self-driven growth. Burkina Faso has demonstrated that with visionary leadership, political courage, and local resource mobilization, true economic independence is achievable. This defies the long-standing narrative portraying Africa as forever needy, perpetually reliant on the West for survival. By resisting Western pressure, Burkina Faso shattered that myth. The nation's success sends a powerful signal across the continent. African countries can reclaim control of their economies and resources. This victory isn't just Burkina Faso's, it's an inspiration for all of Africa. The question now is, why do so many African countries still cling to Western aid as though it were their only lifeline? The uncomfortable truth is that this dependency benefits the West far more than Africa. For decades, Western powers have maintained systems designed to extract Africa's wealth, while keeping the continent indebted and reliant. From loan repayments to multinational profits, Africa's dependence has served Western interests perfectly. But Burkina Faso has broken that cycle, showing that a different path is possible, one built on local innovation, resilience, and unity. The challenge to other African nations is simple, yet profound. Will they dare to follow? Will they break free from dependency and build economies that serve their people, not foreign interests? Burkina Faso's story is not an anomaly. It's a roadmap for economic freedom. The path is difficult, the risks are real, but the potential is undeniable. Africa already has what it needs: the resources, the people, and the will. The future belongs to those who believe in local solutions. By strengthening local markets, utilizing domestic capital, and building trust with homegrown investors, African nations can begin breaking their dependence on the West. However, the greatest obstacle lies not in resources, but in mindset. Too many African countries still believe survival depends on Western support. Burkina Faso has already proven otherwise. Nations with vast potential like Nigeria, South Africa, and others have the capacity to stand on their own, free from the weight of foreign debt. The real question is, why hasn't this shift happened yet? Why do African leaders continue to submit to Western influence and seek financial assistance that only tightens the chains of dependency? The answer is simple. It's time to look inward. Invest in your people, empower your markets, and harness your own resources. Africa doesn't need handouts. It needs self-belief and unity. So the choice remains: will African nations keep following the West's playbook, or will they rise, take control, and chart their own destiny? Is Africa ready to break free and build its self-reliant future? Tell us what you think in the comments section below. And please do not forget to like and subscribe for more.